Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I am your host, Marc Guberti, CEO and founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. If you want to talk with me about how to take your business to the next level, you can schedule a strategy call, marcguberti.com/strategy, which will be in the show notes. If you want to talk with someone today who can help you view the way you practice and how rewiring your brain can really lead to this peak level of performance, we have a great guest on this episode who's going to talk about just that. He offers a unique approach to accomplishing more productivity in the workplace, and he is an accomplished musician and TEDx speaker, someone who innovation and creativity and neuroscience and peak performance, all that stuff just comes naturally to him, and he helps people in all those different areas. He is a certified project portfolio management consultant and a conservatory trained classical and jazz bassist who has been reviewed by the New York Times and performed at Carnegie Hall. This National Speaker Association member joins us today on this episode of Breakthrough Success 369. Gerald Leonard, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Gerald, I'm so happy to have you on the show. And it's interesting how the way we view practice and the way we do it can really impact the performance that we have. And I feel like people have to better understand that. So I'm wondering if you could give us some background into how you got started with this approach. And I also know you've written a few books, so feel free to spotlight some of those as well.
Yeah, no problem at all. You know, when I started playing, I actually started playing, and I talked about this on my TEDx talk, by going into my sister's room, because I used to take piano lessons, but I didn't really enjoy them. But she had a guitar, and I really loved kind of tinkling around on her guitar, and I would kind of sneak in and grab her guitar. And I just fell in love with the sound of it and playing it. And, you know, I noticed that she wasn't practicing as that much. And so one day she caught me with the guitar after sneaking in her room. And as I would say in my TEDx talk, she let me have it in more ways than one, as they think of a sister would. You know, so she let me have the guitar, but she also let me have it as a little sister, as a big sister. Bottom line, through that whole process, I learned how to really practice, and that it wasn't just about the performing or a recital or doing something at school. It was the enjoyment of practicing overall. And that led me to joining a band. And so now I'm a new guitar player and joining a band, and one of my friends is an amazing guitar player. Well, that's when I had to switch to start playing the bass. And with playing the bass, again, I went back to that love of practicing, and I realized that most of the time, most musicians spend most of their life practicing and very little time on stage. We see them a lot on stage, but most of their time is actually spent practicing.
That's a very important distinction, where you hear about someone famous who's on the stage a lot, or you just hear about that really famous person who's on stage a lot, and there's a lot more practice that we don't see.
Exactly.
That invisible part that really creates that masterpiece. And I feel like so many people, they're in a rush to get on that stage. They're in a rush to get all the eyeballs, to make all the revenue. What advice would you have for that person who maybe they've been practicing for a lot, but they're not satisfied with where they are right now, just to keep doing it and results will come? So what's your advice on that?
Well, a couple of things. I think about the bamboo tree, because the bamboo tree actually spends most of its life growing in the ground. And then at the last part, it just shoots up. And pretty soon everyone looks and goes, wow, that tree just kind of showed up overnight. Well, it didn't just show up overnight. It's been growing in the ground for a long period of time. And as a musician, my point of that is, as a musician, you spend most of your time underground practicing. If you think about it, even with professional musicians, let's say if you're an orchestra musician and you're playing, let's say 4 to 5 concerts a week, 2 hours at a time. So maybe 10 to 12 hours a week, you're on stage. Well, the rest of that time, that week, out of those 168 hours, you're actually practicing in preparation, whether you're practicing with the orchestra or you're practicing your part individually to perform on stage for those 12 hours out in the public. And so what I discovered and realized was that about 95% of our time as a musician is spent practicing. We only spend about 5% of our life actually on stage, unless you're just on stage every day, multiple times a day, which most musicians aren't. There may be a few musicians out there who do that, but most musicians spend most of their time practicing. And I bet you we do the same thing, and I realize this as well. We do the same thing even in the business world.
Yeah, and I really like that bamboo reference, because I feel like there are a lot of people who you don't hear about them for many years, and then all of a sudden they sprout up and you think they've been here this whole time. So I definitely love that bamboo tree reference. And I mean, you do have to put in the hours and put in the practice to achieve anything, whether it's being really successful in music or having a successful business. But there are right ways and wrong ways to practice. I mean, Bruce Lee, he said something like, I'm not afraid of the guy who does all these different things. I'm afraid of the guy who does the same kick like 10,000 times or something like that. But even then, if you do that kick 10,000 times, but you do it in wrong form, that's not helping either. So what's your advice for people to get the best out of the time they're practicing, not just for music, but also for business, because there are a lot of parallels in both?
Well, it's something called deliberate practice, and what they found, and I talk about this in some of my research. In fact, one of the quotes I use is from the American Psychological Association, where they talk about deliberate practice, and that the deliberate practice occurs when an individual intentionally repeats an activity in order to improve their performance. In other words, they go after skills that are difficult for them to master, but it's kind of like that they're the ones who are doing the 10,000 kicks or doing that one maneuver over and over and over until it's subconscious. They can do it in their sleep. It's like Tiger Woods playing golf or LeBron James hitting a free throw. They can do that over and over because they've done it so many times and they've done it deliberately. And the other part of this quote is that the claim of this deliberate practice framework is that such behavior is necessary to improve performance and to achieve high levels of performance. And what happens neurologically, and this was also discovered by Robert DeSimmons from the National Institute of Mental Health, is that when we focus on deliberate practice, our minds, from the physiology of attention, it quells all of the other noise around us. And it simply focuses on the brain network that's regarded to that area of attention and focus, and it strengthens that. And there's something else that happens when we do that. It's called myelin. And myelin, it's a chemical that gets around the neurons of the areas of the brain that we're targeting, and it strengthens those areas so that the brain fires with more precision, more speed, and more accuracy. In fact, for musicians, because we use our left hand, especially guitar players, violinists, we use our left hand a lot. There's more, it's been scientifically proven, there's more myelin built up around the parts of the brain that control the left hand than any other part of the brain. So deliberate practice, whether it's in a business skill or in a musical skill, really makes a major difference. And it physiologically changes how our brains actually work, and it impacts our neurological impact, our brains.
And it's interesting you bring that up about the left hand. I'm a righty, but I try to do some things with my left hand because I know it helps with the creativity and some of the different things that you don't get as much with being a righty. And I know some people may be thinking lefty, righty, creativity, just that is a difference. But if you get really that deep for your profession, what you're practicing, what you want to get better at, to the point where it's like, oh, I got to use my left hand to trigger different parts of my brain that I can't do. If you get to that equivalent in your area, it's easier for you to do a higher quality practice because just by practicing doesn't mean that you achieve results. It's practicing in the right way.
Exactly.
I've talked about a little bit before. I'm wondering, Gerald, if you could share with us some of your habits that you would say have been essential to your success. I ask because I feel like habits have such a big impact on all of us. So I'd really love to get your opinion on this.
Okay, well, I'll say some of my habits are, one of the things I do is I do something called brain gyms, and brain gyms are exercises, and I really started doing them after I had this bout with vertigo, but there's some exercises that you can do that enhances your brain activity. And so that's one. Another habit is I keep lists of everything. I keep a running list of all the things that I need to take care of. One of the reasons I do that is, one, it helps me sleep well at night, because when you have a lot of things going on in your life and you have a lot of things going around in your head, if you don't have an organized system to list them out, then you can become overwhelmed with a lot of different things. And so I keep an overall list, and I keep a very targeted list. Something else that I do that's a habit is I have in an office area a really large sheet of paper that I call the Kanban board. And on that Kanban board are 3 columns. And it is, what am I working on? What's in what do I need to work on? What's in progress? And what have I accomplished? And I focus on 3 or 4 major top projects at a time. And I put that in a strategic place in my office or in my house. And every time I pass that area, I subconsciously glance at it. And so I'm constantly reminding myself, here's my top 3 priorities. Here's what I'm working on. Here's the next thing that I'm working on. Hey, look what I've gotten done so far. And these are things that kind of keep me focused and keep me on target. I also have, just specific things that I try to do throughout the day. And I think one of the biggest things from a productivity standpoint is, in the middle of the day, I normally try to take a walk. Whether it's a 15-minute walk or a 20-minute walk or even an hour walk, whatever my day breaks out to be. And here's why. When we are doing either practicing work or doing business work or writing or some kind of programming work or technical work, our brains get saturated and they need a break. And there are people who can push and just kind of work straight through. They will achieve less than someone who strategically breaks up their day and takes breaks in the appropriate places, because while you're taking that break and doing something totally different than regular work, your brain subconsciously is processing everything you've been working on. And it's coming up with, it's solving problems and coming up with answers to things that you don't even realize that you're running into, so that when you come back, you're coming back to your work now with a fresh perspective. You've had a chance to kind of breathe, take in some vitamin D if you step outside. And I've found that helps me to have a more productive evening or afternoon than if I was to just sit at my desk or sit in a practice area and just try to crank through something all day long. And so I would say those are some of the big habits that I've developed.
Mm-hmm. Gerald, those are certainly some really good habits. I love the idea of writing down all of your different thoughts, because we have like 70,000 thoughts per day going through our head. And if you try to remember different thoughts, we do forget things. So writing down things makes it easier to remember. So, really great habits for people who want to be more productive, who want to also really achieve peak performance, like getting out and walking, having some kind of exercise in there makes a really big difference. For people who want to continue following your work, where are some of the best places we can find you?
Well, one of the best places you can find me is on my website. If you go to geraldjleonard.com, and if you go to that website, and also if you click on the About page, you'll find out about my background, and also there's some information on my TEDx and an article there I have, as well as a free webinar I have that they can get access to as well.
Gerald, thank you so much for sharing your resources. Breakthrough Success listeners, make sure you drop in the comments if you're watching on YouTube just one of the big takeaways you got from this video. One of the things I like to do is, for each 1,000 subscriber milestone, we give away free $50 Amazon gift card to someone who does leave a comment on a video. So definitely make sure you share your big takeaway that you got from this episode. Anyway, Gerald, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on Breakthrough Success and sharing all of your great stuff with us. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to have me, and I look forward to it.